I really am upset. I don't want my family to become involved. I'm a Catholic. It really worries me. I cannot help myself. You know, I just... I love Larry.
Male homosexual. In this, the first of two programs, male homosexuals talk about their condition. Comment by Michael Schofield, sociologist and director of two major research projects on homosexuality.
People say your family do it. Someone twists you when you get to the mature age. Well, I don't think it is. I think you're born that way from the start. I mean, I've got five members of my family. I've got two brothers and three sisters. And they're all perfectly normal people. They're all married nearly now with kids. Yet I'm the odd one out. But I don't blame my family in the least for it.
I think it had a lot to do with my parents and childhood. They didn't get on too well together, and I was, as a result, rather torn between the two and very lonely. I hadn't a very great liking for my mother, and I think this was spread across until it became a general dislike for women in general.
In my case, as a small child, during the war, one's father was away for years, and my mother was running the family business, and one was more or less left to grow up on one's own, and then away to boarding school at the age of 9 until 16. In this school, in fact, there was a particularly large group of child homosexuals or potential homosexual children. And during the holiday time, one was spoilt by one's mother and probably idolized. And I think this all helped to... I wanted love, I wanted security, I was very emotional. And at school I developed sort of great emotional feelings towards various people at school.
My father died when I was 1 year old, which that means, of course, that I was brought up in a highly dominant female society. And I went to a boarding school at the age of 13, which left me with boys solidly for 5 years. And during all this time I had very little contact with girls. Most of my friends during the holidays at home were all boys. And I was firmly rooted and orientated into that kind of life.
I think that the very little sort of sex education I had from my sort of seniors was delivered in such a way that it made sort of all sex seem bestial and horrid and brutal and vicious. And I probably stayed away from it altogether.
There are many theories about the cause of the homosexual condition. Most of the experts now believe that it is caused by emotional factors in early childhood. Certainly a large number seem to have come from homes which have been inadequate or unsatisfactory in one way or another. There seems to be some justification in the theory that male homosexuals often have mothers that are possessive and overprotective. There is even more support for the theory that some homosexuals come from homes where their father is absent or ineffective. There are also indications that the homosexual is more likely to be the only child or the youngest child. But it cannot be assumed that all male homosexuals are overfond of their mother or have poor relations with their father, because a large number of men who were brought up in happy and unbroken homes have developed homosexual tendencies. And conversely, many people with unfortunate or unsatisfactory backgrounds do not turn out to be homosexual. There seem to be a few men who can accept from an early age that they find other men sexually attractive, but most of them go through a period when they fight against their homosexual desires, and for a long time they refuse to admit that their homosexuality is permanent or inevitable.
When I really found out about this life, I was about 14, and the first time I had anything to do with him. And then when I left school and I started work in town and I met somebody about my own age, and they just took me into town. And then I went really a feminist. I let my hair grow long and I dyed it and I shaved my eyebrows off and put eye mascara on and all sorts. No, I went really effeminate. In fact, I used to say, I screamed like round the town, as they say. That's to say, no, she's a screaming queen. Well, that's what I was. And I thought it was marvellous. I thought there was nothing like it in the world. To be able to go down at 15 years of age and go down and think, you know, there's somebody else like me after all. And then that's when I first realised that I was a homosexual.
I arrived at a university as a repressed, angular person, and certainly in my personal life very unhappy. And at the time when I was there, it should be the early to mid-50s, there was a curious, seemed to be a curious increase in the number of homosexuals there. A very large society almost was formed. And in a curious way, I think, it may have done me good in that I became conscious of my condition, not merely a realization of it, but an acceptance of it, too.
I was at college in Birmingham for 2 years, and the people I mixed with weren't homosexuals, and I didn't want to be homosexual. And I found that I was very successful with women, and I think it made me feel very good, you know, to think that I could be successful with women. I think for about 3 years I had just heterosexual relationships. I lived with a girl in Birmingham for a year, and I should think it was very successful for about 9 months. And then I met a boy and more or less left the girl. I don't know, everything changed again, you know.
Well, I thought I was probably the only person in the world who felt like that, and it made me feel terribly scared, and it made me feel that all at once, well, everybody must recognize it, and everybody's saying, oh, look at him, you know. And then, because one has the knowledge that one is of a certain type, you meet other people, and then gradually realize that half the people around you are exactly the same as you, and usually to a much greater extent.
When my mother found out, and she said to me, all right, son, you're what you are, but try and cure yourself. So she sent me to the psychiatrist. And I went to him for 2 years, and all I did was sat down and tell him what I'd done all week. Told him who I'd been with, where I'd been, why I went with him, did I love this fella, did I not, why did I go with him, and all the rest of it. And it just went on for 2 years. And in the end, one day, I went to him, and he turned out to me, and he said, listen, son, you're queer. You're homosexual. He says, you go home and be happy being queer. So I've just had to accept it. I mean, I'm still trying to accept it.
In the forces, I led a fairly normal life. I had mild encounters with other men, but I never thought this became a part of me. I always thought it was just a thing stage I was passing through. And at the same time, I had girlfriends all the time. And till it got to the stage when I really wanted a more settled life, I suppose. And one's girlfriends got more tiresome, and it was more hard work taking them out. And so I gave up the girls and decided that I was a homosexual and I was going to make the best of it.
I was very, very guilty about it. I tried self-hypnosis, going around telling myself, I like girls, I don't like men, but it didn't work. And slowly as I got older, 18, 19, I began to accept the fact. And this girl I had for 3 years, I had to drop. It was rather sad, but I could never have married.
It should be stressed that homosexuals do not form a distinct, clearly defined group. In their adolescence, many men pass through a transitory stage of sexual play between boys of school age. And, as Kinsey's research has shown, there is a continuum between male adults ranging from the exclusive heterosexual, who is sexually attracted only to women, through the bisexual, who occasionally commits a homosexual act, to the exclusive homosexual, who is sexually attracted only to other men. Some men with homosexual tendencies do succeed in overcoming these and enjoy satisfactory sexual relationships with women. But others, some of whom marry in an attempt to change their sexual orientation, have been unsuccessful. The limited evidence available indicates that paedophiliacs, those men who molest children, both boys and girls, form a quite distinct group of their own. All the men in this program are exclusive homosexuals. This does not mean that they wish to be women or even to look like women. Not all of them are like the stereotype of a homosexual, the effeminate, mincing pansy. As a matter of fact, most homosexuals get along very well in the company of women. Several sociologists have noticed that some homosexuals choose older women for their closest friends.
I get on far better with women than I do with men. But I'll put it bluntly, they're all right to friendship and they're all right to dance with, but as far as sexual concerned, I'm not interested.
I dislike women extremely. I've been to a mental hospital, and the psychiatrist they tried to warn me, that there's nothing wrong with you. As far as we're concerned, you're all right. But I wasn't all right because I still love the male body.
I like glamorous women. I like to be with them. I like to go to dances. I often walk to a bus with my secretary, who is very glamorous, and I find her very amusing. But physically, I would draw the line at a slight good-night kiss.
I get on very well with my secretary, and I really don't want to extend my acquaintance with women very much beyond that. I think probably because I really tried to separate myself from my mother and family as much as possible. I've taken this just one stage further and separated myself also from women completely.
I think women understand us more than men do. I mean, I worked in a big store in town, and I found that when women got to know us, they accepted us, they became friends with us, they'd like to go out for us for a drink. They tried to understand, but men just turn around and say, oh, he's a puff.
It is, of course, impossible to find out exactly the numbers involved, but estimates have varied from 500,000 to 1.5 million male homosexuals in this country. It's quite a common condition, and probably everyone listening to this program has met at least one homosexual during the past month. For homosexuals are to be found in all types of occupations and in every social class. It is a mistake to assume that most homosexuals work in so-called artistic occupations, such as acting, interior decorating, hairdressing, and so on. In a survey by the Cambridge Department of Criminal Science, 47% of the homosexual offenders were manual workers. As a rule, homosexuals manage to maintain good relations with the other people at work. But this successful integration depends upon their ability to camouflage their homosexual tendencies. Most of them make great efforts to keep their working life quite apart from their sexual activities.
Oh, I live two lives. I live a private life and a public life. There's this pressure of make-believe all the time. It's completely artificial. Having to live with one's colleagues and simply act a part all day. You have to do it day in, day out, year after year.
I don't put on an act in the office that to pretend I'm any different than I am. And if people suspect things, fair enough, but it doesn't usually make any difference to their behaviour towards me. One particular colleague at the office is very anti-homosexual and talks to me as if I couldn't possibly be one. And my first impulse is always to say, well, look, I am a homosexual.
At night, when I'm with my friends, I can relax, all my nerves let loose. But during the day, I have to come the big man act. I have to be like the fella next to me that works on the bench next to me, my mate at work. I have to be the same as he is. He's married with a couple of kids. I've got to chase the girls in the shop to make it look as though I'm a man. I'm not in the least bit interested in them girls. I couldn't give anything whether I saw them again or not. But I've got to put that atmosphere on to make people think I'm a normal man. Because if they once find out that I am queer, I've got to leave my job again. And I lost a 3-year apprenticeship through it. I only had 12 months to go on my apprenticeship as an electrician in a big store, and I lost it because of the men making a fool out of me in town.
One isn't at work very long, naturally they ask, are you married? And you say no, and they give you a funny look, and you can almost hear a mental why. And then I always feel they're thinking there's something wrong with him, you know, 30, not particularly ugly, but, you know, why is he married? And, I always dread that question, you know, are you married? Because I can, you know, they eventually ask, why aren't you married? When they get to know you more. And always asking about girls. Do you have a girlfriend? And of course, if you say no, you're more or less admitting to the fact you're homosexual. And if you say yes, then you start weaving a web of lies. What's she like? Who is she, you know?
I work with very pleasant people who may or may not really be aware of what's going on. I think that when one begins to turn 30, companies will begin to wonder why someone isn't married, probably. And you can fob them off for quite a while by just saying you can't afford it. And, of course, this is even a good reason for further salary increases. But in my case, I don't think that anyone, if they did put 2 and 2 together, are going to be so worried as to take any action.
I'm a bag of nerves at work. I am a bag of nerves at work. I'm worried all the time about what other people's thinking, what other people's, you know, going on through. I'm worried, you know, about them saying to me, you're queer.
The Wolfenden Report, which was the result of a special commission set up to study this problem, recommended that a homosexual act between consenting male adults in private should not be a criminal offence. But the government has not implemented this recommendation, and all male homosexual acts continue to be illegal. Each year, more than 2,000 men are convicted of homosexual offences, and about 350 of these are given prison sentences.
I think it's a shame the law is as it is. I feel sometimes that around every street corner is somebody who is just looking for something to trip me up. But I'm not terribly flamboyant in any way. And I just feel that a harmless, as far as I'm concerned, a harmless slip might lead to something really nasty that would affect not me, but my friends and my family, and that's what I worry about sometimes.
Whenever I see a copper, shall I put it, I just avoid him. Because there's enough coppers in Manchester, and if you once get spotted by them as being queer, that's it. Your life's not worth living anymore. You just got to get out of the town and avoid the policeman. There's one policeman I know works on the traffic lights near my house. He sees me going home from work in all my dirty clothes. I'm just a normal bloke going home from work in all my dirty clothes. He sees me coming out of my house again half an hour later, dressed up to go to town. Then he knows I'm queer. Maybe it's me walk that changes when I come out of the house dressed to go to town. Don't know. But he just gives me that filthy look. And he just looks at me and I just look at him and I just make sure I get down the road a little bit faster when I'm going out.
They don't worry me, I don't worry them. As if I was going into a toilet and I was trying to pick somebody up, and then naturally I wouldn't like the law. But I don't do that sort of thing, so it doesn't worry me. I mean, they don't know I'm queer unless I try to prove it.
I think anyone living in a really big city is lucky in this respect. There's just too much of it going on in 101 different places for the police to be interested, really. So I'm personally not at all worried by the law.
I think one is very conscious of difficulties, the possibility of the police invading one's own private life in many ways. One does pass a lot of one's time thinking that everything's perfectly all right and rather forgets that one is committing illegal acts and so on. But I think there's at the back of one's mind, quite a lot of the time, there is an awareness that the law is on the other side. And that one is perpetually in danger of being arrested.
As a homosexual, my dread of the law before I did clash with it was that if ever I did clash, that my parents would become aware that I was a homosexual, and I thought the world would kind of split apart. But they stood by me throughout it, as I think all parents will do. When the law was on my trail, I was caught in what is known as a compromising situation in a car with another male person. I was sentenced to a 12-month prison sentence for a homosexual offence. They don't make any attempt to effect a so-called cure. And the reverse is true. It's just a waste of life. I think above all, prison life proves that there's a degree of latent homosexuality in all male persons. I found it very difficult to get a job again afterwards. And at the present moment I've got employment because I lied to them about the reasons for being out of employment for the number of months I was in prison.
It's clear that many of the problems of homosexuality are problems common to all minority groups. Professor Allport has listed some of the traits which characterize minority groups. One of these is the tendency to seek each other's company, and indeed there are homosexual coteries in most of the large towns in this country. Another of these traits he calls protective clowning, and this is very typical of homosexuals. Another trait, noted by many researchers into race relations, is a certain amount of inescapable anxiety, and the same feeling of always being on their guard is found in most homosexuals. Perhaps the most important trait of minority groups is a tendency to reject the standards of the dominant group. Nevertheless, a research for the Social Biology Council into the community activities of male homosexuals showed that over a third of the sample appear to be well integrated, happy in their work, mixing with other people outside homosexual circles and so on. Well integrated despite the influences of social pressures which tend to drive them in the opposite direction.
It's very difficult to generalize homosexuals because there are so many different types. They can be the most difficult people. They're very jealous people. They can make life very difficult for you. You get all walks of life meeting together and enjoying each other's company, but it comes to an end.
The interesting thing about minority groups is that the class structure within minority groups is always much more intense, and of course it's vertical rather than horizontal as normal class structures are. This means, for example, that a boy from very working class origins can mingle with people who come from from upper middle class origins more naturally, simply because his sexual predilections are the same.
Unfortunately, the obvious type is the one we're sort of typed with, you know. A lot of people assume we're bitchy and effeminate and go around with jangling bracelets, you know, because they're the obvious ones which normal people mostly see and assume practically the whole of the homosexual world is like that, which isn't true. It's like judging women by prostitution.
That's what gives the false impression of the queers is the talk. No, oh yes, darling, where have you been this year?
Yeah.
And darling, where are you going next year? Well, that's the false impression because we are queers and we're normal working blokes.
People do have this strangest idea of this sort of thing that one has. I mean, because one is homosexual, it doesn't mean to say that you're looking at every man as a prospective bedfellow.
We, the same as normal people, can't stand the fact that men interfere with young kids and try to corrupt them into queer life. Because although we are homosexuals ourselves, we don't think that anybody should be made and forced to be into this life. And I would personally get hold of any man that interfered with the kid and kick his teeth in. I'd kick him to death.
Most homosexuals will go through a period of promiscuity at some time of their lives, and many will continue to be promiscuous. But it's a mistake to assume that homosexuality and promiscuity inevitably go together. A husband and wife are subject to legal, social, financial and ecclesiastical pressures to continue the marriage. But in a homosexual affair, the pressures are in the contrary direction. Even so, there are some who manage to establish a stable relationship with another man, which they consider to be like a successful marriage.
Unfortunately, the gay world is rather a promiscuous one, and at the same time, people always think there's something a little bit better around the corner, and eventually they get into the habit of flitting from one relationship to another, with the result that they themselves are less fit to establish the sort of relationship that, well, we consider anyway to be ideal.
being homosexual, one accepts that there are no permanent relationships. Marriage as such is, I think, a totally unacceptable idea. Just wouldn't. I mean, it isn't. It just does not work.
You get over the first few years, and continue as a married couple would, and some people are just more promiscuous than others. You know, they're never sort of satisfied with one person for long. But I myself am very happy. Have been for 7 years now, and I hope to be for the rest of my life. It's the only thing you can do, because you sort of don't belong in the other world, and you've got to make the best of your own world, and the biggest battle is accepting the way you are and making the best of it.
I consider my own relationship as being quite successful, because it's had to survive a great deal, and it has survived, and we now have a deeper understanding and a closer relationship, which is a lot more than just physical. We don't live in even the same city. We see each other about once a month. I doubt whether it would survive if we lived together for long, because it's so difficult for two people to live together, and especially two homosexuals.
I think that the duration of a really happy homosexual affair is probably very similar to the duration of the first part of a marriage, you know, before things begin, of a normal marriage, before things begin to get a little bit tiresome and irksome. The only thing that worries me, I think, is sort of really rather extreme old age, you know. I think that there can be a certain amount of unhappiness which the heterosexual may be guarded, may have protection from.
My friend now, we've been together for a long time, and I love him and he loves me, and, well, without him I'd be nothing. I mean, I do everything that a woman should do in the house. I cook for him, I clean for him, and, well, I do anything he says because I love him. I think, really, we're just quite happy being the way we are. If people would only leave us alone or just accept us a little bit. Give and take, that's what I say, but they won't. They say, oh, they're too queers. And they sort of sneer when they say queer, as if you're a freak. Well, I don't think I'm a freak. I don't think I'm any different than anybody else, except that I just happen to be in love with a man instead of a woman. What sort of love it is, I don't know, but I think it's a great love. It's something far deeper than anybody could ever realise.
I personally aim for this relationship. I've never found it, and the people I know have settled on these lines. It doesn't really seem to work out. We're not the legal ties of a normal marriage, and I think there's a degree of neurosis in all homosexuals because they have so much difficulty and attuning themselves to everyday life, and I think this causes a great deal of friction. Basically, I think as a homosexual, I'm not happy, and many are not, and I think one realises that it's an essentially lonely life, or at least I do, and of course one realises one never, well, if one's to be honest to life, one can't marry and have children, and this one has to accept. I really don't know what will happen. I hope to meet someone with similar feelings and something satisfactory might work out, but at 26 it hasn't done so far, so why it should in the future, I don't know.
You have been listening to Male Homosexual, in which male homosexuals talked about their condition. The comment was by Michael Schofield and the production by Colin Thomas. The program was recorded.